Welcome. My name is Yvonne Carey. I'm an instructional training specialist with the ICTW.
And I'm Jessica Sipovic, also a training specialist with ICTW. Today, we're going to talk about making work-based learning really work through the stages of learning. So when we're thinking about work-based learning, the goal that we should always be keeping in mind is the idea of competitive integrated employment. All students should be striving for real work, for real pay, regardless of the disability or needed accommodations or support. So these are community-based work sites for all students. That is what roots the importance of work-based learning while we have students still in our 9 through 22 programs. We really want to make sure that we're thinking about not just establishing meaning experiences for the students, but really what's the instruction that's occurring in these community work sites that are going to set our students up for post-secondary employment and success. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the stages of learning, which is the whole concept of this webinar, but we're going to use Jose as kind of our thread example that runs through the content that we're discussing. So Jose is a 21-year-old student who was recently hired by a local business after a successful internship experience. Jose worked with his job coach and teachers to learn specific skills required for the position. By the end of the internship, he mastered the skills in both the classroom and community worksite settings. Recently, the manager of the business reached out and expressed concern about Jose in his new role. He's been struggling with performing certain tasks, specifically filing documents, and has been requiring a lot of support from his coworkers. You know that he could do those things when he was in your classroom. He could do those things with his job coach out in the community. So thinking about right now in your head, what could be the cause of Jose's struggle in the workplace now that he is fully hired, despite being able to do all that work previously? Keep him in mind as we kind of walk through the stages of learning today, because we're going to keep referencing him and really think about what could be the cause of his struggle in his new job.
When we're planning instruction for students, we should really consider 4 stages of learning. We're going to talk through these stages today and get you to think about the application of them in your classroom and in the community. Typically, we only focus on acquisition. And this is the very first stage where we're often teaching skills that are brand new to a student. So the goal is really focusing on accuracy. When we're teaching a new skill, we decide what that proficiency level is. So that might be the condition, or excuse me, the criteria statement that you put in a student's IEP goal. So we have to think really carefully about what's proficiency for this goal. So for Jose, his proficiency level for filing might have been performing this task 10 out of 10 times correctly, in the classroom or with his job coach. And then we sort of check off that box and say, oh, he's mastered that skill quite well. In order to achieve acquisition, we use systematic instruction strategies, which are evidence-based strategies to teach students with severe disabilities. But that's not really the whole story. If we just teach to acquisition, we're actually only teaching 1/4 of the way there. There are other stages of learning that we need to consider. So our next stage is fluency. Fluency really is a rate concept. It's when we're thinking about the demands of the environment and then how quickly our students are able to respond to those demands. So this is looking at how quickly a student can perform a task. So sometimes this is more relevant than others. So for example, Jose has got to get the bus to work. Well, we need to be able to teach him to pay, either using his card or to put money into the slot. So not everybody is going to wait, 5 or 10 minutes for him to figure out to do this. So we need to teach him to do it within a reasonably acceptable time. So fluency is all about teaching the appropriate rate for the students to perform the skill. The next stage is maintenance. Maintenance is probably one of the more important and underestimated stages of learning. So this is when a student has mastered the skill. So they've reached acquisition. So whatever you decided proficiency criteria was in your IEP, they've reached that level. Now we need to slowly take away all of those instructional supports, but we want the skill to continue. So we need to program this quite carefully and specifically. We can't just stop instruction and not think about, well, is the student going to continue to perform the skill, even though I'm not teaching anymore? So we slowly fade out those supports over time. We have three main strategies that we think about for maintenance. The first one is overlearning. So overlearning really means when the student has reached acquisition, that we continue to provide guided practice. So we are still watching them and checking in and making sure they're performing that skill with the level that is required for them to be successful in the real environment. So for Jose, he demonstrated that he could file, he reached his acquisition goal, but we want to, when we stop providing prompts and instruction to him, we fade that away, we want to make sure that he's continuing to perform at that proficiency level. So providing continued practice, even though he has already reached acquisition, is one strategy to facilitate maintenance. The next strategy is really how you set up your instruction. So this is teaching skills in the natural setting. The more opportunity a student has to perform the skill, the more likely it is that they will maintain it. So choosing skills that are functional and meaningful is really a strategy to facilitate maintenance. The third strategy is one that we're more in control of, and this is fading reinforcers. When we think about fading reinforcers, we also want to think about fading back the instructional supports. We slowly fade out prompts, and then we fade out, if we were providing any verbal reinforcement or tangibles to the student, we fade those out systematically. So the student is not relying on us to give those prompts or those reinforcers to perform the skill, but they're really looking at the demands of the environment. And that behavior is maintained by natural reinforcers in the environment, getting the job done. At the end of the job, their boss telling them they did something well, but it's not on the same schedule that we would have during instruction. So we very slowly and systematically fade out those reinforcers once students have reached acquisition. Our last phase of learning is generalization. So once we've worked on acquisition, we've worked on fluency, we've worked on maintenance, now we want to see whether the skill can be performed across different settings, maybe with different people. Now, generalization is a little bit unique in that we really have to think about this before we begin instruction. So we have several strategies to facilitate generalization that we might think about even as we're delivering instruction. So one of those could be using lots of different people to deliver instruction. So the student learns to respond to prompts from different people. We could teach in lots of different settings. So the students learn to perform the skill, at school, at home, at the work site. So they really are learning the cues in the natural environment, and they're not just focusing in on teacher instructions. So I've provided a resource here that gives you more information on generalization strategies that we could consider prior to instruction, during instruction, and then even after instruction. For Jose, we could think about some of his struggles with learning as it relates to both maintenance and generalization. So did we provide enough opportunity for Jose to learn the natural cues in the environment to respond to? Did we vary the instructors? Did we vary the settings and the materials that he was using as he was learning those skills? So if we're just teaching kids skills that they're required to use in the natural environment, but we're just teaching in the classroom setting, we're really not setting them up for success. So we could consider using materials from the work setting in the classroom. We could consider teaching in the classroom and the work setting so the students have an array of stimuli to respond to. So thinking about Jose now, you've covered the 4 stages of learning. Think about what changes you would make to your instruction, either from the planning stage, delivering instruction, or once we've reached acquisition and now we want to think about how this student is going to use the skill across settings. What changes could you make?
Well, that is the stages of learning. Thank you for joining us today to hear more about how we apply the stages of learning in work-based community settings. If you want to learn more about transition topics, please visit us at our website at ictw.illinois.edu. If you scan this QR code, it will take you to an opportunity to join our listserv so you're kept up to date when new webinars or content is posted on our website, or if you want to join us for an in-person workshop sometime in the future. Thank you again for joining us today.